as you mentioned, my 11th year of being on this planet, I was coming into the house after feeding my dog, and it was getting dark already. And I looked over to my right, and above a tree line, like about, oh, I don't know, 500 feet or so away, very close, was this oval object, and
Mm,
it was self-illuminated, and it wasn't casting any light down on anything, but it was just self-illuminated, and it was this kind of a cream color, if you will,
mhm.
type of of color that, well, the bottom line, after just taking a quick look at this, it's just scared the hell out of me because it wasn't making any noise, and it was slowly going over this tree line and getting, going into an area behind some other houses in the neighborhood, and it just blew me away, and
Mm,
it scared me, and so
yeah.
I went in and to the house and finally got my father to come out, and it was gone, of course, when he by the time he came out, and he says, "Oh, it's probably just a beacon of light reflecting off a cloud." But I'm going, "Oh, no, no. This- that's a very low cloud to begin with, and there's no way this light could possibly be reflecting off
Mhm.
of something." So anyway, soon thereafter, I went to the library and I started looking for books on UFOs. And
Now, I have a question about that because I heard you say that in other interviews. And at this time, like, was it hard to find books in the library on this, or was there enough?
well, actually, this is the late 50s, okay? George Adamski had written a number of books
Yes.
on the topic. And so I I got those, brought them home, read them cover to cover, was blown away by the pictures that he had taken through his telescope. I mean, I was totally into it.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and then, time passed and no other incident happened that I'm aware of. Let's put it
Mm.
that way.
Hmm.
Uh, and, the topic kind of just faded.
Mm.
Girls, I guess, became more interesting to me, as I got a little older. Eventually, I went off to college, University of Vermont, and I was in the ROTC program. And when I graduated, just right before I graduated, I got married. And my first duty assignment was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma,
Mm.
become an artillery officer. Nothing dramatic happened there either. Um, and then, basically, um, I tried to, once I had 2 years active and 4 years reserve
Mm.
responsibility. And
Mm.
at the end of the 2 years active, uh, moved the family. My wife was the only family I had at that point.
Right.
And we moved back to Connecticut, where I was born. And eventually had a couple of daughters, and in 1985 decided that I would move out to California from Connecticut based on an opportunity that came up about buying into a company out there. And so that's what I did. Um, and uh, backing up a little bit here, when I got out of the service, I interviewed for a couple of jobs. One was with West Vaco Pulp and Paper, and the other one was Procter and Gamble. And I eventually ended up with Procter and Gamble, and I was selling Head and Shoulders Crest toothpaste in Reading, Pennsylvania. And once
That's
again,
good.
nothing strange happened. There was again, it was the whole topic was just not on my radar anymore.
Mm.
And so getting back to moving out to California in 85, it was soon thereafter that I picked up the San Jose Mercury News, and a gentleman by the name of Stanton Freeman was
Hmm.
coming to San Jose City College to talk about UFOs and the government cover-up. And I'm going, oh my God, I got to go see this guy.
Forgot about all this.
So it was like somebody threw the switch again, you know? So when I was 11, the switch was thrown, kind of just faded. Now I'm all jazzed up again.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to go see this guy. I expected to see, a handful of people there. The auditorium was packed. He did this, his usual inimitable presentation, showing us the books, the information that he got through the Freedom of Information Act. With a lot of it was redacted
Mm,
by the CIA and other government three-letter organizations. And so I was just absolutely jazzed.
yeah.
On my way out, um, there was a table set up in a foyer by an organization called MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. And I stopped by there and I found out that they had a journal that they produce monthly. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna get their journal because they're talking about cases that they're investigating.
Mm,
And so um, that was to me, you know, one way to start getting back into this.
yeah.
And but after a while, it was like, oh, that's not enough. That's not enough. I got to get deeper into this.
Yeah.
And so um, they have a field investigator training course. And I decided, okay, I'm gonna take this course and become a field investigator. So I did, and I passed the test and started doing cases with a more senior investigator, which was great. I mean, showing me all the ropes, if you will, how the
Mm,
organization operates.
that's cool.
And the first case, person, had a sighting, but then they told us that they had contact with these non-human intelligences,
Mm,
and I was skeptical. I was kind of a nuts and bolts kind of a guy.
yeah.
I just want to
Yeah.
know how these things operate, maybe where they're from. And, I wasn't into what kind of creatures people were coming into contact with. So, but then almost the rest of the cases that we got involved with, almost without exception, people were talking about the fact that not only did they have a sighting, but then they had contact with these non-human
Mm,
intelligences, and then they started telling the stories about being taken, and and the classic, you know, scenario where a person is taken, they're put on a table, they're injected, their samples are taken of their blood, of their semen, their eggs, you name it, and it's quite horrifying. It's quite
mm,
horrifying, and so one day I got a person that asked me, he says, "Do you know of other people that are having these kind of experiences?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And the next thing I know, I'm facilitating a support group in my
wow.
office in San Jose, California. And that really opened up the floodgates to
Yeah.
listen to these people tell their stories. And, you know, these people, when you hear their stories and how emotional it is for them,
Mm,
you know that these people are not trying to blow smoke up your tailpipe.
yes.
It,
Yeah.
it's real. It's very real for them.
Yes.
And most of the time they cannot talk to anybody
Yeah.
about this. They
Yeah.
can't talk to their family members. They can't talk to fellow workers. They can't talk to clergy. It's so isolating,
Mm,
and the stigma, that's been
yes.
attached to this whole phenomena. It's really repressive.
Yeah.
And a lot of times these people have an experience and they think they're going crazy. And
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
they go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and they find out that they don't have a psychopathology.
Mm,
So then what do? They stew in their own juices, a lot of cases.
mm,
Uh, so it was really interesting that uh, one year soon thereafter that I got a call from the international director of MUFON telling me that there was a reporter in my area that was looking to talk to a field investigator about what we do, and he said would it be okay for him to give him my contact information. I said sure, absolutely. So he came out. We had this really good conversation. He did a really nice report. It was written up in the Monterey Coast Weekly paper
mm,
and in California. And soon thereafter, I got a call from a woman that she was actually part of the story. She was interviewed as well
mm,
because of her experiences.
mm,
But then she called me to find out, can you help me with understanding what's going on with my brain waves when I'm in contact with these off-earthly entities? And I'm saying to
Mm,
myself, oh my God,
interesting.
I I have no, means to do anything like that. But
Mm,
and I wasn't, I didn't know where this conversation was going to go. But then she said she was working with an emergency room doctor down in Carmel. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Because obviously this doctor,
knows what he's
educated
doing.
man is, that he must see something that he's
Hmm.
continuing to work with her. So that caused me to call a doctor friend of mine who eventually became the co-founder of Opus, Eugene Lipson, who unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. And he was interested in contacting other doctors that were interested in the phenomena. I said,
Mm,
hey, why don't we go down there? Let's hear what this woman has to say. And you can meet this doctor and then let's see where this goes. So we did. This one Saturday afternoon, we went down to her house. And as we walked into the house, there was a picture on the wall which caught my attention. And she was standing on the back of this rather large boat in crystal clear blue waters. And
mm.
I said, what's that all about? And she says, well, I was down in the Caribbean there helping these treasure hunters. And I said, really? How were you doing that? And she said, I was in contact with the captain of the galleon that had gone down. Well,
Interesting.
so that blew our minds right away. And shortly thereafter, we found out that after a near-death experience that she had had, she became extremely psychic and had all these
Mm,
telepathic capabilities. All this stuff started to come to bubble up in her. And so we had this incredible afternoon where she was telling us stuff about ourselves. There was no possible way she could know. It just didn't, because she didn't know us from Adam, other than that
mm.
article, but
Wow.
she was talking about our families and different things like that
Yeah.
and where
Yeah.
we were going to go in the future. And oh my God. So we came away that afternoon and, stopped at this hamburger joint and said, how can we possibly do anything for people like this? Because there
Mm,
seems to be a real need out there
mm. Which
between
says
all.
everything in itself.
Yeah. And so that's when the idea of setting up an organization, and in 1994, OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and
Mm,
Support, was recognized by the
mm.
IRS as a 501c3 nonprofit organization.
That is awesome.
And so now we've been doing this for over 30 years.
It's just interesting to see the progression, and I mean the fact that, yeah, your whole story is just, it's incredible because so much of it is very organic and grassroots, and it's
Mhm,
turned into this huge thing.
mhm.
And again,
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
shows the bigness of all of this, of everything.
yeah.
How many people are involved, just all of it.
Well, I've postulated a theory of late, which some people probably think I'm crazy, but I believe we've all had an experience, whether we
Yeah.
consciously remember it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And an example of that is my own personal example of that is that one of the support group meetings we had a person in the group said, "Hey, I've seen you before," and I said, "Oh, where at a UFO conference?" No, no, I saw you on board the craft.
Wow.
Oh, so I said, "Oh, really? That's interesting." And I kind of blew it off because, I have no conscious recollection of that at all. So, a year and a half later, totally different person in the group says the same thing to me. He said, "I've seen you
No.
before." He said, "You were sitting on this bench naked on board the craft and you were freaking
Oh
out, and they told
my
me to go over
gosh.
to you to calm you down." So
Wow.
at that point, based on the how detailed his
Mm-hmm.
description was,
Mm-hmm.
I decided to go get regressed. And I had three separate regressions, and I had multiple past lives. And I did not come up with anything along being on board a craft, but a subsequent conversation I had with another person, they said, well, perhaps this person actually did see you on board a craft, but in a previous life.
Interesting. Yes.
Because this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with these entities, that they're able to manipulate space and time
Yes.
in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
It's a totally different reality that we don't understand.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like magic. It's
Yeah.
like magic.
Yes.
Um, but getting back to your comment before, you know, this thing has been going on for eons,
Mm.
you know, and I think we're just not at the top of the food chain. There,
Yes.
there's a whole nother level, whether it's interdimensional or time travelers or extraterrestrial in nature. Um, and the fact that there are people like yourself that are doing these podcasts that are educating the populace. So the stigma is starting to ratchet
Mm-hmm.
down
Mm-hmm.
because, and then you have shows on television like Ancient Aliens and other
Yes.
shows. Population is getting much more aware that there is something going on. And
Yeah.
now with the congressional hearings, oh my God,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
Grush is out there with Graves and uh, Fravor and telling stories about these tic tacs, and then we
Yeah.
have alien bodies, we have crashed UFOs. I mean, come on.
Yes. Yeah.
So they're having experiences or in contact that this is real, folks.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
happening. And
Yes.
the next congressional hearing is coming up on November 13th.
Mm.
And which supposedly there's going to be even more whistleblowers that are going to come forward.
Interesting. Yeah, November's gonna be a fascinating month.
Oh my God. Yeah, between the election
Yeah, it's a wild ride right now, and honestly, I'm all for it. I think it's an incredible time to be alive, and it's fascinating
well, I would have never
watch
believed
and
that
experience.
we would be this far
Yes,
along in
yes,
disclosure, if you will.
yes, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
you
The
know,
internet really does change a lot of things. Yeah, I think it's helped move this more quickly than a lot of us realize. So that's interesting, and you know, a can of worms in itself. Something I heard you speak about aliens and where they stand on like believing in God, let's
oh
say.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, they seem to have, you know, this idea that there is this quote unquote a supreme being of some sort, some overarching power that exists in the universe. And you know, reincarnation is talked about a
Yeah.
lot with abductees and these entities. That it's the way the universe operates, and
Yeah.
that you know our energy never dies.
Hmm.
It just goes out there and then takes another form and comes back. I mean, you know, do we have significant proof of this? But then you do have stories about people in this lifetime
Yeah.
that relate to a past lifetime and can tell you
Yes.
everything about that past lifetime.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, this
Yes.
woman that who claimed that she was an Egyptian princess, and she went to Egypt. She could read the hieroglyphics.
Wow.
You know, I mean, she knew exactly where everything was in the temple, and what it meant. You know, what these things meant to people. I mean, I forget her name off the top of my head, but it's a very famous story. She had fallen down stairs, and when she got knocked out, when she came to, this whole nother persona
Wow.
took over.
Wow. Which is so that's it's interesting because I've heard you also speak about how the commonalities that happen between near-death experiences and abductions or whatever. It's I mean truly so many of them come back with these gifts.
Exactly. I had given a small presentation to an experiencer group out in Las Vegas at the MUFON Symposium a couple of years ago. And this couple was in the audience. It was Robert Salas and his wife. Robert Salas
Oh,
was the captain at the Maelstrom Air Force Base when the UFO came over and shut down all the missiles. Okay, so there was multiple witnesses to this thing. Come to find out that both he and his wife were abducted together. She came back after the abduction. She could heal people.
unbelievable. When you say she could heal people, what do you
Mhm.
mean by that?
Well, I mean, evidently she has the capability of, and I've heard stories
Like
about this
energy
before
healing?
where, yeah, energy healing. Yeah. If somebody has cancer, they go in, they
Unbelievable.
work their magic and I was flying back from a MUFON symposium in Virginia. This is years and years ago. And I ended up sitting next to a woman who turned out to be a doctor, was the head of St. Jude Hospital.
Wow.
And um, we started talking, and she asked me when I was going home, and I said, "Yeah, I was just coming back from a symposium." "Oh, what was the symposium about?" I said, "Well, it's about UFOs." And she, oh, right away perked up. She says, "Oh,
Wow.
that's really fascinating. I've always been interested in that." And she says, "I've got some interesting stories to tell you." And I said,
Mm.
"Really?" She says, "Yeah. I was at another hospital before I took over this job at St. Jude's, and uh, there was a woman who had cancer, and we were going to operate on her. And so that morning we went in to bring her into the surgery theater, and she said to the doctor, "I don't need it anymore. I'm okay." And what do you mean? Well, they came last night and they took care of it.
Wow.
They thought she was freaking out,
Yeah.
right? So they wheeled her in, but they said, "Okay, let's be double sure. Let's do an X-ray, make sure that issue is still there."
Right, right.
And they did the X-ray. It was gone. It,
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
And she knew.
she
Yeah,
knew. She
yeah,
knew.
yeah.
She knew. Yeah.
Think it was, yes. I've heard you speak about Rachel's eyes, Helen's.
Oh yeah. Helen Luttrell.
That is
Yes.
fascinating. Can you talk
Oh.
a little bit about that? And then I would just kind of love, you seem like a very reasonable man and you know your stuff when it comes to this. I would just love your opinion
Hmm.
on on all of it in general. Just like,
Hmm.
I mean, for me, I've heard I've heard enough at this point that like I think anything is possible and nothing really shocks me too much. And this one kind of at first I was like, wow. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, I can wrap my mind around this.
Well, it's there's a lot of information that have come out recently that verify a number of the facts in Rachel's Eyes book,
Wow.
Helen's book,
Okay.
um, where the military retrieval teams that she
Mm,
talks about in the book, it's happening. Okay.
mm,
And there's a base evidently in northern Nevada, not Area 51. Um, and she kind of gives you hints as to where this place is, where they bring a lot of the victims of these crashes, the aliens, okay? And they bring them to this base. And but the main part of the story is her telling about her daughter who went to school with
yeah.
a hybrid,
Yeah.
and the fact that the military was bringing her special food to eat because she couldn't eat normal food, like you and I would eat. Um, and one of the people on our board, June Steiner, actually did the hypnosis sessions with Helen. Um,
Wow.
and so we have a real connection. Unfortunately, Helen passed away last year.
Did Rachel know all of this like in real time when it was happening? Like, did they discuss what was happening? Did her roommate try to
Oh
hide
yeah.
it? Like, what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, the way she dressed was, it tried to hide as much of her features as possible because they were different. They were very different.
Interesting.
But the fact is, they were trying to integrate these entities into society, which is, if you read any
Huh.
of David Jacobs' books,
Hmm.
he calls them hybrids now. They're so hybridized that they look just like you and I. You
Hmm.
can't tell.
I was going to bring up the case from the 90s of the couple that
Yeah.
were, oh, wait, is that the
Yeah,
same one?
the amateur pilots, the
Yes,
two
yes, yes,
amateur
yes.
pilots.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And they
yeah.
they had, yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, that was one of the first cases that I really dug into, and so what happened was this couple, they were picnicking in a state park north of Santa Cruz, and they were coming out. It's rather hilly, and they were coming down out of the upper part of the park, and it was getting to be dusk, and they noticed this light over the ocean, over the Pacific, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger until literally it was over their heads, and it was a triangular craft about the size of a small Learjet.
Mm.
And then it kind of silently, no sound, silently went into this canyon behind where they were. They noticed another light over the ocean, and this light got bigger and bigger and bigger until it was over their head. And the first craft that they saw, they felt they were looking at it. The second one, they felt it was looking at them, and they became frightened at that point.
Mm.
They backed up underneath this big old pine tree that was up there. And I went up there with them to follow this whole route and everything. Well, this area is, even during the day, is rather dark because it's highly vegetation, a lot of
Mhm.
vegetation, and it's rocky.
Mm.
And so even during the day, trying to get down out of there, you got to be careful. Uh, well, it's like they felt that they were on automatic pilot, like they were floating. They
Wow.
kind of just glided down that hill till they got to their car. And that's the last thing they remember until 3 hours later, they ended up in a restaurant, which is only about 10 minutes away from where they were. They had no idea how they got there, what happened, what transpired during those 3 hours. So they did eventually come to one of the support group meetings, and they brought a photo that they developed after being in this park. Now, this park does have poison oak, and there's poison ivy up there and all kinds of stuff, normal stuff.
Right.
And they went to the doctor, and doctor said, well, this is not poison ivy or poison oak. I'm not sure what it is.
Mm.
And so I guess they weren't satisfied with, I guess it was his doctor. And then they went to her doctor, and he says, well, maybe it's some reaction to something, that's causing this, but it's not poison ivy or poison oak. So anyway, they got some topical thing to put on it, I guess at that point. But anyway, they brought this picture to the group, and almost without exception, every member in the group said at one time or another they had a similar rash.
Wow.
And so this one person in the group says, well, I think I know what it's from. So we were all sitting there with our mouths open.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's a reaction to the fluid that they dip you in when they bring you on board the craft to sanitize you.
Wow.
Now, that was like 30 years ago. Okay. That's one of the first cases I got involved with. I got a call from them about 3 months ago. She got on the phone with me here and said, I now vividly remember being dipped in this fluid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Has she
So,
got, has she done like regression work, or is that just like
well,
coming back to
no,
her?
they haven't. I've talked to them about it back then, and then again when they called me, I said, you guys ought to just get it. But they seem reticent about doing it, and I don't blame people
Mm.
for that.
Yeah,
Matter of fact,
yeah.
when people come to us and say, well, I'm thinking about hypnosis, and I said, well, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's hard to put it back
Hmm.
in. So you might hear
Hmm.
something you're not going to like or you're going to have a
Yeah.
problem with.
Yeah.
So you got to be damn sure that you want to hear this stuff.
I believe it was the Omega study that
Mhm.
just, I've heard you read some of the findings. Yeah, I would love for you to talk
Sure.
about some of
Well,
that.
yeah,
I think it's
yeah. By
fascinating.
the way, the omega-3 study is called the omega-3 study, which was actually funded by MUFON back around 2007 or 2008, I forget now. But MUFON was totally a nuts and bolts type of an organization. They were not dealing with people that came to them and having contact with non-human intelligences. They just
Mm.
they just weren't there. So I talked to the international director, and his name was James Carrion at the time. And I said, you guys are missing a boat on this thing. I
Mm.
said, so I'm here to help you. Send those people to me, and I'll work with them. And that's what they did. And then after that, they seminar. Can you put a team together to, you know, work with these abductees and then give us a report? And so the omega-3 study is on our website, opusnetwork.org, in the document and article section. So you can read the full report, but the conclusion, okay, and I'll just read you the conclusions. In general, abductees slash experiencers profile differently than do their comparison counterparts on a number of general psychological and specific neurological variables. Yet there are remarkable similarities between the experiential group and the comparison group. It should be noted that in no case did experiencers or comparison group participants show any signs of mental illness or personality disorder. So there was no psychopathology in any of the groups that participated. We had 71 people that claimed that they had contact with these non-human intelligences and 51 people as the control group. Fantasy proneness does not appear to play a differentiating role between the experiential and the control groups. However, sensitivity to alternative realities and early recurrent paranormal or psi experiences seem to play a role in the abduction experience. Childhood conflict, psychosocial tension, and abuse and trauma more likely facilitate a dissociative coping style in later life. And this, again, not in a psychopathological dissociative way. It's just, in other
Mm-hmm.
words, this is how people are dealing with the stress and the
Yes.
trauma that
Yes.
they may be having growing up.
That makes
Okay.
sense.
Um,
Mm.
how much a part dissociation plays in the abduction experience remains an open question. Um, Both experience with and interest in the abduction phenomena have an impact on how one's body is perceived to function, how one views the world and one's purpose in it, and how one defines and redefines one's faith, tradition, and beliefs. In essence, both experience with and interest in contact seem to change one's sense of self and one's worldview. And so many people come back after these experiences and understand that we need to be better stewards of the planet.
Mm.
You know, we must care about the air we breathe, the water we drink.
Mm.
We need to be more kind to one another. We need to be more loving. I
Mm.
mean, these are all very positive things
Yes.
that
And basic fundamentals. It, like the fact that it's taking all of this for us to learn that is pretty incredible.
yeah, and I mean, and so that's why I'm saying if eventually if we all are taken and we all come back with this worldview, there won't be any more
Yes.
wars.
Yes.
Okay, we won't have to deal with crazy people in politics.
Mm. Mm.
Anyway, uh, let's see, where am I here? Okay. Abductees and experiencers believe that there is a sentient, purposive alien intelligence at play in their lives and at work in the world.
Mm.
What these intelligence goals are seem to be more beneficent than malevolent, more benign than malignant.
Mm.
This, though, remains an open question. This part is really interesting to me. The brain generally and the temporal lobes and limbic system more particularly play a mediating role in the anomalous experiences such as abduction. So we've we've noticed that between the two groups, the control and the experiences group, there is differences in their temporal lobe activity, um,
Ah.
which the gentleman out at Stanford University, Gary Nolan, uh, microbiologist,
Yes. Yeah.
uh, that has done a lot of work with experiencers doing MRIs on their brains. And what he found was that in the area between the caudate and putamen, there is a lot more connections in these people that have telepathic and psychic abilities.
Mhm.
And it seems to be generational.
Interesting.
And that these people are connecting with other people that have that same capability.
Hmm.
And it's like an evolutionary thing that's going on. Gary posited this, which I think is fascinating. He says geologists say that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old and that our genome mutates about every 600,000 years. So he says you line that up, and based on where man is today, the Earth should be 9 billion years old to
Mm.
get us to that point, unless somebody way back when manipulated our genome, which which is what I think a lot of people are starting to think,
Yeah.
that we have been manipulated in some way, shape, or form. And this, Darwin didn't have anything to do with it.
Is there anything that just like really stands out to you? Just, I mean, whatever, something that you've either personally experienced or maybe thought or wondered or have heard, just like something that like really is like everyone needs to hear like this one thing or like, you know what I mean? Like, is there anything like that that just like really stands out for you?
Well, I think, it's from an experiential point of view. You know, I had the opportunity to go to this area in Gila Bend, Arizona,
Mm,
and which is near Luke Air Force Base, military base. And there was exercises that night, and we were in an area in a mesa area, and there was all kinds of Indian petroglyphs and things like
mhm,
that, and it was covered with them. And so we spent the night there. We had multiple incidents go on that night. We had a blue orb that slowly came through the camp. We had another way to describe it is a bow tie. It looked like a damn bow tie, you know,
wow.
or the infinity symbol, maybe the
Uh-huh.
infinity
Uh-huh.
symbol. Okay, on the edges it was red, and on the inside part it was yellow, and then it would change. It would go yellow on the outside, red on the inside.
Wow.
We tried to take pictures of these things. None of the pictures turned out.
Hmm.
None of them. And then, and it was like we I believe we had missing time that night as well.
Mm,
We have no idea because it was like this. We see this object, and then the next thing you know, we're in our campers or whatever we were. I was sleeping in a back of a RV. But I mean, it was just a weird night, But I mean, I've seen things that you just can't explain. And that night there was military exercises going on where they were dropping flares, okay, like in the case of the explanation for the Phoenix lights, those are
mhm.
flares.
Right.
Yeah, right. Um, and they were very distinct. You could tell that they were
Mhm.
flares. But this other object was just totally bizarre. Didn't make
Wow.
any sense at all. So that's
Wow.
pretty significant right there.
Yeah. I would just love for you to kind of wrap us up with just, I would just love to know kind of like where you're personally
Mhm.
at in all of this, just what you think of
Sure.
everything.
First of all, I think that we are in a time right now which I'm just blown away by where we are right now in the
Yeah.
disclosure process because it's a process
Yeah.
that's going on. You know, there are a lot of people, a lot of smart people, uh, intelligent people that are starting now to take this whole phenomena seriously.
Mm,
And I think we're at a pivot point right now where we can go down this path and get the answers we need, or it's going to be blocked by
mm,
the Pentagon or
mm,
the religious right. Because in Lou Elizondo, he just came out with a book, and he talks about the Collins Group within the government. He calls it the Collins Group, and that they believe that all this is demonic,
mm,
and they want to just suppress it, bury it. All right. Obviously, Lou does not feel that way. So if we can get by this hurdle, um, and the Pentagon saying, well, it's national security issues, but I think it's more important that we understand, and it may eventually come down to the fact that, yeah, somebody lands on the White House lawn
mm.
and say we're here. It's the kind of thing that you know we're at a seminal point right now that
Yeah.
this whole thing is starting to unfold, and there are people putting their necks on the line, as Lou
Mm,
did.
mm.
His story in the book is tragic. Beginning
Yeah.
phase of this thing, and how much how much he was pursued, and
Mm.
lies told about him and his family, and oh man, it was horrible. So a lot of these whistleblowers are totally, afraid of coming forward.
That's,
But I think
yeah.
they're being encouraged, and now we do have some things in place from a legal aspect to protect these people.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it's an amazing time. Um, Again, thank you for what you do, because it's important that you are continuing to get the word out on all this paranormal types of things. Um, and that is just another reality that we don't understand, you
Mm,
know. And I
yeah.
believe it's all connected in some way, shape, or
Yes.
form.
Yeah.
It's, so, hold on to your hat,
Yeah.
whatever you're
Yeah.
wearing, and
Right. Yeah.
we're gonna have
It's
some
going to be
interesting
interesting.
times in November for sure.
Yes.